For the last 3.5 years, we've been buried under an avalanche of UFO news, a tsunami, unlike any period in my all-too-long lifetime. And for those who've been around this subject for a long time, it's felt pretty special, truly an unexpected development with news stories and videos and interest among mainstream media, within Congress, among mainstream scientists even. But to those who are relatively new to the field, who've just sort of tuned in since that New York Times story of December 2017, it might feel underwhelming at the moment. Why don't we have a massive expose every day on the front page of the Washington Post or on 60 Minutes or in the local paper? Come on. Where's my UFO breaking news? Why hasn't someone released a new document or a video today? Wah! Actually, there's a heck of a lot going on. So much that even a diehard UFO UAP guy like yours truly has trouble keeping up with all of it. On Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, not to mention popular magazines and websites and podcasts. So tonight, I've enlisted the help of some trusted colleagues, guys who live and breathe this stuff, who are in the trenches daily, fighting the good fight, pushing back against the debunkers, and even more so against the supposedly pro-UFO factions who say they want the truth, so long as it's their truth. Tonight, in this first half, we'll have a little UFO UAP free-for-all to get caught up on what's happening now, what might be coming soon, who's bashing whom, so the rest of us can get caught up. Danny Silva is a citizen journalist who focuses on UFOs and related phenomena in his writings. He's written about To the Stars Academy, ATIP, and other topics along the road to disclosure. His work can be found at silvarecord.com. Joe Murgia, better known as UFO Joe, is a veteran television cameraman who's worked on several high-profile programs, popular stuff, including Pawn Stars. In 1996, like a lot of us, he read Whitley Strieber's Communion and got pulled down into the UFO rabbit hole. He writes about UFOs and government programs on his popular blog. Ryan Robbins uses YouTube to cover these same topics. His channel is called Post-Disclosure World, and he has an alter ego called UFO Jesus, who's made quite a mark in the field. We have links to each of their work, by the way, on the Coast to Coast website. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks, George. Glad to be here.
All right.
Thank you.
We're talking with an esteemed panel, Danny Silva, Joe Murgia, Ryan Robbins, and when we come back, we jump into crash retrievals, the Holy Grail. Does the government or some of its contractors have goodies stashed away in some attic or warehouse somewhere? We're going to find out in a moment here on Coast to Coast. Welcome back. If I were a CEO of some gigantic aerospace company and somewhere in the bowels of the corporate establishment, I had a room full of crash retrieval materials, some unknown craft that crashed or maybe an intact craft, and we've been trying for years to figure out how to duplicate the technology, I'm not sure I'd give it back. If assuming that the limited number of people left in government know that we've got it, my company has it, I think I'd like to hang on to that stuff. Joe, you've written quite extensively about crash retrievals, the likelihood that someone's got some goodies somewhere. This language that Danny Silva was telling us about in the congressional legislation that sort of creeps closer to saying we're coming for the crash saucers and bodies, got to be encouraging to somebody like you who is into that particular subject.
Yeah, so when I saw the language, I was like, wait a second. Are they talking about crash retrieval? Nah, they're not talking about crash retrieval. I'm misreading that. So then I saw some interviews with Lou, and I'm like, all right, he's getting a little closer saying that. And then he was on Fox News this past week, and he's talking about that language, and he says crash retrievals. So Lou believes that's what they're talking about. And we know, Chris Mellon talked about Dr. Eric Davis was on the Hill giving briefings and telling them information where they can go look for this stuff if they take the time and they go to look. And then we have, Senator Harry Reid, who talked about how he was always told Lockheed has this stuff. Lockheed has this stuff. So he goes to Lockheed Martin, but the Pentagon says, sorry, Senator, we cannot give you access. And Senator Reid was like, well, if there's nothing to hide, why wouldn't they give me access? The other part of the language talks about making field trips. So, yeah, if they go actually and go look, maybe they go to Lockheed or Northrop Grumman, what they need to do, George, is they need to make it obvious to people about the secrecy levels, they need to bring somebody like the Secretary of Defense. And if somebody like that gets denied access, he should have access to every special access program. If he gets denied access, that tells everybody involved there's something going on here that's either extra governmental, outside the Constitution, and these programs have no oversight. So we're getting closer. I mean, I am not a crash retrieval expert. I really have not. I did not delve deep into it as far as the topic until a few years ago, and we could talk about it later when Wilson Davis leaked.
I remember 32 years ago popping up this story about Bob Lazar, S4 out near Area 51, and crash retrieval stuff and intact craft that had been out there. And the reason that Lazar says he was allowed to come into that program was that nobody had made any progress with it. People attacked Lazar, his background, his claimed credentials and everything, and understandably so. But they really didn't focus on the larger claims, the more important things that he was saying. And that seemed outrageous, that we had flying saucers from some other ET civilization or wherever. And it kind of got buried. But, now people are kind of openly talking about it. And even people who disregard or don't believe Lazar say that that's basically a scenario, that we've had this stuff for a long time, that we whip it out every couple of years to see if we can figure out how it works, but we haven't had much progress. Is that your understanding of it, Joe? And then same question to Ryan.
Yeah, when you read Wilson Davis, which it's Eric Davis, and it's not allegedly to me. It's to me. I can't say I know. I believe 1,000% the documents are real. It's Eric Davis interviewing Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was supposedly shut out of the special access program that had the intact craft, and they supposedly told him all of that information. So, you hear Eric Davis talk about crash retrievals, and it's interesting because Eric does not believe Lazar. But Eric says that in 1989, the program shut down because they were at a standstill. And it's funny, that's the year Bob Lazar says he was working there at S4. So it's like, that to me, it makes me think twice. It's like, I'm skeptical of Lazar, but when I hear that, I'm like, well, maybe they were at such a standstill, and they're like, you know what? Let's think outside the box, and that's how Bob Lazar got in. And Eric Davis, in the Wilson notes, Admiral Wilson says that the program manager of this special access program told him they have an intact craft. And George, we could talk about it a little more later, but I would love to talk about some of the skeptics who refer to Admiral Wilson, the Wilson notes, as a movie script and some other things, but I have no doubt they're real, and you've spoken about it. Other people have spoken about it. We don't have the proof yet, but, a friend of mine and I are working, trying to get something, at least something that will show people beyond a reasonable doubt that, the notes are real.
Well, let's talk about it now. Give it a nutshell. For our audience does not know the intricacies of the Wilson Davis memo, what it means and who wrote it and how it surfaced, but give us a thumbnail sketch of that, and then we'll move on to something else.
April 1997, Will Miller, Commander Will Miller, Stephen Greer, and Edgar Mitchell meet with the Director of Intelligence with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Thomas Wilson, and they tell him, hey, we have information about this special access program that deals with crash retrievals. Okay, so a few months later, it takes him like 45 days. He goes looking. He finds it. He calls Miller. Miller tells Mitchell and Greer, hey, he found it, but he was denied access. And we heard that story for so many years. We're like, it's a great story, but, I don't know. It sounds believable. And then we had nothing else. That was 97. And then 2 years ago, these documents leaked online. Giuliana Marinkovića sent them to Danny and one of our other friends and said, take a look at this. And there are these notes where Eric Davis is interviewing Admiral Wilson and asking him what happened in 97. This is 2002 now. They met in Las Vegas. And he's saying, what happened? And Wilson basically says, I went looking. I found them. I flew out there, and I said, what do you guys have? And eventually the program manager told him, we have an intact craft. We think can fly through air, water, and space, maybe dimensions. We don't know where it comes from, but we have some ideas. It's an intact craft, and when I asked them to give me a briefing, they denied me. They said, sir, you do not have a need to know. Well, he was not on the bigot list. The bigot list has all the lists of people who can get access to that information, no politicians, no presidents. It was all scientists and civilians. So that happened, and when it leaked, people thought, there's no way is this real. I asked Eric if it was real. He said no comment. Make a long story short, I did a lot of work on it. I had sources. I came to the conclusion it was real. even with Thomas, Admiral Wilson denied it very strongly, say, I don't know Eric Davis. I haven't been to Las Vegas since 1980. That threw me for a loop. But even this past week and a half, out of the blue, I have sources contact me. They're in a position to know. And they go, just so you know, the notes are legitimate. And I'm like, I already know that, but thank you so much for saying that, because it always helps to have more sources on a story. So that's basic. I don't know if I described it well enough, but
that's pretty good.
Basically the story.
So it's not a movie script. Those are real notes. I can tell you I have some insight into that, knowing many of the people who are involved, and that the story of how those notes came to be and how they surfaced is pretty well known in a small circle of people, and it's not something that was just made up out of thin air.